everyone. Once again, very pleased to be there. Happy to host that conference and to share about 1 year later what we've been doing at Blablacar in the data teams. So to present us briefly, the two speakers. So I'm Emmanuel. I'm the VP Data at Blablacar. So I'm helping the teams do their work. Like to phrase it this way. Been at Blablacar since 2015, and so today I'll be on stage with Tushar, who's our senior data engineer. Is joined us in 2021, and has been a very precious ally and one of the key player in the changes we'll describe to you. So we have a few slides about the data teams. What we don't have is a ton of explanations about what Blablacar does for a living, but for those of you that don't know, we're helping people move between cities, and we do that with carpooling, long-distance buses. At some point, we hope to distribute train tickets as well. So that's we're about mobility. We're about shared mobility on the ground. The mission of the data team is here. So we want to provide dependable data products. I'm glossing over what a data product is. That's a topic for much discussion, but not for today. To give you a sense of what the teams are and some facts and figures, because after all, we are data people. We're a group of close to 50 people. There are 5 different job families. So we have analysts, scientists. It's more than just data. We also have software engineers. We work for everyone in the company. So 300, that's just the number of licenses, Tableau licenses, but it's probably more than that. The scope that we manage is fairly large. So that's a few thousand tables, a few hundred reports, hundreds of terabytes of data. And that is not to brag, it's more to tell you, hey, we live in a big system, and that will have impact about the changes that we do and how we operate them. One thing that is important and that defines us is that we are deploying work in and out of production. So when you use the Blablacar app, you see things that the data team builds and maintains directly in production. You also don't see a ton of things that we do like all data teams, so managing Excel spreadsheets and so on, which we aren't super proud about, but we have to. The team has been there for a while, and we have been fairly good at executing on our ML strategy. So we are making a lot of automated decisions every second. Last year, we embarked into a big change, which we codenamed Zamac after Zamac Degani, who wrote the first article, the first well-publicized article on the data mesh. And we had that because we wanted to operate better at a bigger scale. The team had grown a lot. We had more business units because of M&As. We had more use cases, especially on the ML side. So we needed change. We needed to do things differently. You can watch the video from last year about what we did at the time, etc. Today, we're going to focus a bit more on how we did it. But a couple of learnings that we had were, and very strong insights were, in our change, we wanted to create ownership, and that ownership required having autonomy. So that's why, Lorraine, I loved most of what you presented, almost all of what you presented, but it was not coordinated, just had the same ideas. But we wanted ownership, and we knew that to have ownership, you have to have autonomy. Another thing that was important, and that's some of the one characteristic of a complex system, is that you need to have explicit boundaries so that you know a bit more how to segment your problem, how to start small, etc. These boundaries are arbitrary, so you need to draw them. They're hard to do, but you need to be very explicit about them. If you have ambiguity there, it's going to be super hard to manage. So how does this materialize in practice? And then we're going to give you a tour of what happened in the last 12 months. And we wanted to align our organization on our business objectives. So what we did, and what you have on the slide, we took the company organization. So there's one block about demand, so all the passengers coming to the platform. We have a few blocks about supply, carpooling, buses, etc. And we wanted to have data squads that could map into that organization. So that's what on screen, and that was really the starting point for us. We wanted to have an organization that mapped how our business was working. If you do only that, you optimize for being close to the business, but you are also a team of experts, and if you have autonomous squads with multidisciplinary teams, etc., you lose a bit the, hey, I'm a data analyst, and sometimes I just need to talk to other data analysts, but I'm the only one in my squad, so how do I do? That's why we created chapters. And chapters, that's how you maintain expertise and excellence by job. And that was important to have that transversal forum chapter so that we kept the expertise strong. Now, so implementing all of that, and I'm accelerating so that it's not a 3-hour talk, but that started Feb 2022, Jan-Feb 2022, and lasted till May 2022. So we created the squads, we had the principle of the organization, the big principles about chapters and squads and so on and so forth. What we realized pretty quickly was if you want to reap the benefits of an organizational change, you need to align your stack with it. And to make the parallel with what Lorraine was sharing before, so you remember the 4 quadrants, organizational change, that's more in the social aspect, and that's more about people, competencies, and so on. If you don't align your stack with it, you're going to be stuck. And what we did to not get stuck is what Tushar is going to tell you about. So in a nutshell, we brought in Tushar. We told him, hey, look, how do we do? We want the organizational change. We did it. We understand what we need to do. Now, how do you evolve your stack so that it maps with your organization and the two feed each other and are not working against one another? So handing you over the mic, Tushar.
Perfect, thank you. Hello everyone. So thank you, Emmanuel, for doing the introductions, and I will continue to what Emmanuel said. We needed to evolve our data stack to match the organizational changes which have been done. The goal for us was pretty clear. We wanted to make the squads autonomous so they can build and deliver data products end to end with little dependencies, and they can progress on it pretty quickly. So the methodology which we introduced for evolving our data stack can be broken down into three steps. The first one is which tools and technologies are required for making the squads autonomous. The building the plan which we want to introduce, because now we'll be introducing a new tool or technology which will be across different squads, which will be impacting a lot of stakeholders, how we build this plan. And finally is delivering this plan, which will impact a lot of teams and a lot of stakeholders. So deep diving into the first point, which tools and technologies we want to, which are required. The first step which we started was identifying the problematic, identifying the issue. We didn't want to look into multiple issues at the same time because we all have multiple issues. So this point was pretty important for us, that we want to address one particular issue and go in that direction. So we started with a high-level plan. The high-level plan consists of different things. We first try to explain the current situation in which we are, and what is the problem which we are trying to solve. We try to address the audience which it will be impacting. It will be within the data services, or it can be even outside the data services. Then we look into the proposed solution, what kind of solution we want to introduce or what we want to build. We also look into the timeline, or how will we roll out this particular plan. This is how we start with like building the first problematic or a first plan. For the proposed solution, we also spend a lot of time doing the market analysis. The market analysis is just that the plan which we want to do or the solution which we want to propose, is it best in class? Do we want to build or do we want to buy that solution? Once this plan has been proposed, it goes within the engineering teams. We spend a lot of times reviewing the plan between the engineering teams, discussing and debating about it, and then we discuss with the staff, clarifying the ROI which will receive from this introduction. The next step is building the plan to introduce them. As I said, because we are entering into the data mesh, so the organization has increased. We have multiple squads which will be impacted by it. So we start with the discovery cycle. In this, we also try to define, do we want to do a revamp, or are we going to do a big migration? Is it going to be a small change or like a big revolution, which was specified before? We spend a lot of time doing stakeholder impact, because as Manu told before, we had a lot of stakeholders who are depending on the core data warehouse. So we spend a lot of time trying to identify the stakeholders, how they will be impacted, and what will be the next steps. We clarify the ownership, who will be owning the code, who will be owning the project, how the new tool will be introduced. Then we spend also some time defining the timeline and the resources. So the project can be small, it can be a couple of weeks, or it can transform over particular quarters. So how will we getting all these resources? Do we have enough data engineers, or do we need another job families also? So as you know, a small change in the data warehouse can impact all the job families. So how we can get all these resources beforehand. And the last and the important thing is the ramp up, because if we are introducing a new tool or technology, the people might not be the expert of it. So we need to introduce some trainings, we need to build some kind of onboarding sessions. So this is all which we take into consideration while building a plan to introduce a particular change. And then finally, the delivery of the plan. So once we have identified what we want to do and how we want to do, we go into the continuous delivery mode. So it depends, it can be in agile sprints in which we do multiple batches of production. We spend a lot of time building a proper reporting and communication. The reporting is more for the staff to give them a view of how the project is progressing. Are we stuck? Do we need more resources, more engineers, more time? And communication is for the stakeholders. A change in the warehouse can impact stakeholders. Are we breaking things or not? So our transparent communication is pretty important when we are in the delivery cycle. The service SLOs is also one of the major parts which can stop or go the project, let's say. So we have to maintain a seamless introduction of a new tool or technology. We make sure that the changes which we are introducing does not break a lot of things. So we maintain a service SLO. So if we are breaking things in production at a regular rate, we stop the delivery of the plan, we readjust our strategy and go again. And finally, but it looks small, but it's very important, is the governance. Because we are introducing a new tool and technology, the people tend to go towards the old way of doing things. So we introduce a layer of governance by which we make sure that people are adapting to the new changes which we are introducing. So in short, these are the three major principles by which we introduce a new tool and technology. I'll go a little bit in more examples, like which we did in the data warehouse for making the squads autonomous, so they can work in the data mesh fashion. So let's start with the first example. So we are on Airflow, which is the central orchestration for us. So one of the major projects which we did was doing a migration from on-premise to Cloud Composer. So we start with the problematic. So the problematic which we had was maintenance and scalability. The problem which we were facing from the on-premise Airflow was the scaling problem. We had hundreds of complex DAGs, multiple thousand tasks, and the usage of Airflow was getting bigger. It started as for the data warehouse, for the data engineers, but then it became a general orchestrator for data analysts, scientists, even outside the data services. We had limited monitoring on it. We were facing many issues in which the instance was breaking, or we were having some kind of performance issues. And we soon realized that learning to scale and operate the Airflow was bringing very little value to the day-to-day of our data engineer or other engineers who were working on it. So what we decided to do was move towards Cloud Composer. So as we did the migration, we had close to no maintenance cost. Everything was maintained by Google, and the data engineers and the analysts can focus more on developing things. And the solution was easily scalable. As we are growing, as we are in the data mesh, it easily scales to all the squads which are producing new data products every day. The second problem which I'll explain is related to data observability. So the tool which we introduced was Monte Carlo. The problematic which we were facing was data quality. So we had in-house tooling before we introduced this new tool, but we saw some issues. There was data inconsistencies, there was corrupted or missing data. We had reactive monitoring, so many times it was the stakeholders who was coming to us and saying that, your data is corrupted, we don't have data for today. The reason for this was also the scaling test, which is, I'll explain to you that a little bit later. But then we also started losing the trust in the sources of truth, like the KPIs which we were producing, and the information coming to us. Like, we were receiving a lot of data, and we were not sure if the data which is coming to us was complete, corrupted, or not. The reason, as I said, is the scaling of the test. Because we were growing, there were more people coming up. We were not able to scale the test as we were ingesting new sources or building new data products. And humanly, it became quite difficult without adding more teams or people to manage this kind of a framework. So that the gains which we saw as we introduced Monte Carlo was we were keeping with the industry standard. As soon as a new way was identified for data quality, we were easily able to implement that. The global health of our data, it improved, and we were also able to understand it. The tests were ML based, so I'll not go into the details of the product, but it becomes very easy for us to put new tests on the data assets, on the products which we're building. The monitoring became proactive. We were the first ones to know, okay, the data is broken or there are some issues, and we were the first to react and communicate with the stakeholders. We were able to save a lot of hours, engineering hours, on doing the root cause analysis, because before it was taking a couple of hours or minutes to identify what was broken and what should be done. With Monte Carlo, it improved significantly, and overall, with all these things, the data quality of our warehouse, it improved. This big project is linked close to data mesh. So as we entered into the data mesh, we saw the problematic around ownership. So we had close to 3,000 plus data assets inside the warehouse. Our warehouse is hosted on BigQuery, so it can be data sets. We had tables, external tables, views, routines, whatever you want to say. So we had thousands of assets, and as we entered into the data mesh, each of these assets has to belong to a particular squad. The problem which we were facing with pre-Zamac was mixed ownership, access and security. If I give access of my data set to something, it consisted of all different assets owned by other squads. I didn't want to share it. There is access problem, security problem. We were not able to track the cost. We were not able to link one particular cost to one particular squad, let's say. And for new squads, it was becoming unclear where they should put their new asset. So we were seeing all these issues with the monolith warehouse we had. So we just finished this project. So we basically split our 3,000 assets into different workspaces. So now each asset, anything which has a small thing, belongs to a particular owner. The squads are independent to develop new things. They know how to develop. There are a set of guidelines which tells them how and where to place their objects. The access and security became easier because it became controlled in a particular way. We narrowed the scope of the squads, and we were also able to track the cost, improve the monitoring with all these different things. One last project which I'll talk about right now is DBT. So the problematic we were facing was the complexity regarding the transformation pipelines which we had. So we had hundreds of data pipelines, hundreds of Airflow DAGs, and the transformation pipelines, mostly on SQL, were pretty complex. We were seeing a lot of invisible data dependencies. With Airflow, we could see the task dependencies, but not the data dependencies. We couldn't quickly identify which tables upstream, downstream are connected to my table, what will be the impact. And we were also diverging in the development style. We had different data analysts, data scientists, newcomers, and we saw that the development style was diverging. We were not particularly following our industry standard. So the gain which we saw from the DBT was, first of all, the DBT was customizable. We customized it to fit our needs. We clearly and automatically defined the data dependencies, which is a huge plus for us. And we also move towards a common development style. So now for a particular kind of operation, it tells us what kind, or we can see like what kind of development style we want to do. So I introduced a lot of tools and technologies, but with introducing sophisticated tools without expertise, it has a negative ROI. So we are introducing new tools, new technologies, but we not always have the knowledge, the complete knowledge of implementing them in the right way. So what we did basically, so how to overcome the lack of knowledge. So it's not a secret. I will tell this. So we followed 4 points. I'll start explaining them a little bit. So first of all, we brought some external experts. So Christophe Bleffery, maybe some of you know him. So we bought him for working on DBT. He helped us in answering if DBT will solve the problem for us or not. Is it the right tool which we want to introduce? Because we have a large warehouse, large number of pipelines, will it be useful? Starting right and imagining the future. With that, it gave us very clear delivery goals for the platform teams, for the engineers, like what we want to achieve. We were able to understand the complexity of the pipelines and the tables we have, and the time which will be required for doing this big migration. And he also helped us in building the right framework for our particular use case. We don't want to go the native DBT way. We want to adapt it to our needs. So having an expert, having Christophe on this particular project, filled the knowledge gap which we were facing with this new tool. We also spent a lot of time sharing and discussing with our peers on MDN, the Modern Data Network. So our problematic is something which is not new. It has already been shared by large audience who have tried and tested different solutions. Some of them have already faced it, some of them have already tested and introduced new solutions. So we were able to get the right feedback pretty quickly, and it helped us in saving the time for introducing a new tool or technology. We also spent a large amount of time on getting the contractors. They were super helpful in pursuing with the delivery of time-sensitive projects, time-sensitive topics, and also of delivery between squads and chapters. So squads are very business-focused. They want to answer a particular business need, whereas chapter are working on these big transversal projects which impact all different squads. So how will you be able to deliver on both the squads and the chapter with limited number of people? So contractors in this way were able to help us, and also in terms of big migrations, which was repeating kind of jobs, we were able to take the use of contractors on this thing. And the last and the most important one was also restaffing the chapter data engineers. We were hiring rigorously to hire new data engineers to build the expertise and introduce the delivery within the squads, let's say within the chapter. We also realized we want to hire different skill sets and different seniority so we can manage a good balance between planning and delivery. So yes, for the next steps, I will give it back to Emmanuel, who will explain a little bit further on how the chapter moved and also the progress on data mesh.
All right. Thanks, Tushar. So I'm going to get back to restaffing the data engineering chapter and making the link with the presentation we saw before. That's where you get to see that the stack that you're trying to build, so the technical functions you're adding to your team, if you don't have the skills or the bandwidth to implement them, they amount to pretty much nothing. And for us, that data engineering chapter, he went through a lot of swings, which we'll describe. But essentially, there was one of the difficulty we to some extent created a bit for ourselves, but that exemplifies how important it is to align your staffing, your skill sets with the stack and your vision. Because if you have one but not the other, you'll not make much progress. So what happened? February 2022, we're at the beginning of our data mesh, so we take the existing people and we say, okay, we need to create a chapter. Before we had a team, now we need a chapter that's going to operate differently, etc. So we anticipate a bit the split of our central warehousing team into the different squads and chapter. That means saying, hey, you will end up in this team and so on. On paper, that's pretty easy. So in practice, it's a bit more difficult because you need to compose with, hey, I'm a senior, so I can be the only person in my team with my skill set. But if I'm a junior or I just joined the company and I'm alone in a squad, then it's more difficult. So we had to deal with that. On top of that, we also had a bit of churn. So some people left and we had to backfill them. When you are doing a big technical migration, that creates two kind of problems. One, which aren't specific to Blablacar, is just we're sharing it as well because we think everyone is impacted by them. One is you lose experience and knowledge, and that's hard to replicate. All the more so when you used to have a central team with very close-knit people that maybe didn't document as needed because they were sitting next to each other, they knew each other, etc. So when you start breaking that thing apart, you see all the things that were okay-ish, but actually are not okay at all. So there was that loss of knowledge. And then there is the lack of bandwidth, because as people move out, they don't work for you anymore. You can potentially have a contractor that's temporarily stepping in, but they're not going to deliver as fast, they're not going to be as autonomous, and so on. So Feb to December, it was a hard time because we had some people leaving. We had to figure out our strategy. We started backfilling some positions with contractors while waiting for newcomers to join, etc. From between Jan and 2023 and May of 2023 this year, our hires started arriving. So what happened was strange because on paper we were getting back bandwidth because newcomers joined and so on. In practice, when you join a company, you're not 100% operational day one. It takes you 1 to 6 months to ramp up from 0 or close to 0 to 100%. Meanwhile, we still had our big project and we wanted to make progress and so on. So that created a lot of stress in the team, on the project. And that led to interesting conversation, but we knew it was for the better. And since May, now we have something that's closer to the target setup, and the difference between H1 this year and H2 is like fantastic. You see the impact of having all of these newcomers in a new system with a new stack, with a better maturity profile, in the right squads, with autonomy and so on. The pace at which we are delivering, the quality of what we deliver, etc., is really exciting. You'll notice on the slides, but we did rely, and Tushar was explaining it, we did rely on the contractors and experts to bridge the knowledge gap and to also enable the team to keep working because you also have business as usual to support. So we did leverage these to move forward, and that's important. That's something it might be a bit unnatural, or you are not sure how to make it work, and many people are, hey, how do I get some temporary help? It works. If you don't make it work, it's probably more on your side than on the contractor side. So today, where do we stand? The chapter is 8 people. We do have a couple of open positions. And what's interesting is that given that we have reworked a maturity profile, the experiences, the expertise, then we are capable of hiring different profiles. We can onboard some juniors, which before was a bit difficult. And that changes a lot of things for our strategy as a chapter. The mission statement of the chapter is a lot clearer as well. And it benefited from all the newcomers that could impact it, bring their own vision. So it also helped us remove a bit the blinders of having too much of a Blablacar-centric vision to bring all of these new people. So overall, it was painful to make all of these staffing changes, to build the expertise, but it was worth it. If we had to redo it, I would still do it slightly differently. If we can decorrelate a bit the churn part and the restaffing from the big technical project, if you can do that, do it. It's easier. If you can't, it's more painful, but you can still do it. So to wrap up and give you a bit of a timeline view of what we did, so we called the project Implemac. As you can see, we're very creative with project names. Implemac is just implementing Zamac. So the first part that Tushar described is we wanted to plan, and that was about domains and ownership. Then you start delivering on the ownership, so you need to do your mapping and you need to do it right. You need to start changing the mindsets and mentality. You move to delivery on the conventions and guidelines so that everyone is primed to adopt a new way of working. And if you miss that part, you are just piling on things to change. So it's important to get it right and to say, hey, from now on, people will switch to a different convention, different ways of working. Then you'll see we're starting having 2 timelines because we parallelized a bit of work. I'll try my 3rd mic. Hopefully this one will work. So yeah, okay, it works. Right, I'll keep my voice for later during the networking. So then we move to how do we plan the decomposition? Super important topic. That's the part that, yeah, everyone is very excited to move beyond because the planning, you're drawing a lot of things, you're writing a lot of document, but no work has like concretely started. So do it and spend time on that because that's where you avoid making big mistakes that cost a lot afterwards. The delivery, that's when things get real. So each asset had an owner, and then we started to move physically or digitally the assets to the new owner, say, hey, you're going to get the alerts, and hey, please rewire some of your workbooks, dashboards, etc., to these new assets. What was interesting is we didn't want to break everything, as Tushar was explaining, so we had to be very careful about what we were doing. Obviously, we made some mistakes. That happens. But overall, it was manageable. Then came the plan for DBT, and we started planning for the sources migration. So following the decomposition, you need to do all of that rewiring, which needed a plan as well. And you can see that essentially when you start having 2 lines, that's also when we started having more people working on the project, either newcomers or some external help. 7th step, that was we started to plan how we would move our big spaghetti plate of DAGs into DBT, and that required drawing boundaries, saying, hey, this part, this is team 1, this part, this is team B, and how are you going to migrate, and so on and so forth. Meanwhile, we were finishing the delivery of the customization of DBT. As Tushar explained, we wanted something a bit more specific than what was offered off the shelf. And our platform team was working to deliver that so that the teams could then speed on the breakdown. And 8th, which is close to where we are today, we've delivered so we've cut most of the spaghetti plate, which is a good thing. And we've also completed all of the reporting source migration, so all of the Tableau workbooks and different assets that are throughout the company are rewired to the new ecosystem, the new names, the new data sets, and so on. So what's left? We have still a bunch of things to do. But we need to do that same migration to other domains. Right now, we've been focused on the data warehouse, which is the core part of it, but we also have data marts, topics owned by data analysts, scientists, and so on. So we need to expand what we are doing to new topics. And to get back to what Lorraine was saying, we not necessarily started with the smallest piece of what we had to do, but we didn't do everything at once. So we knew from the get-go that we wouldn't do the data marts migration to DBT right away. It would wait till we had made progress on the rest. So there is a part about as we expand, we also want to improve the DBT experience to newcomers. because right now it's used mostly by data engineers, but in 6 months it's going to be used by data analysts, scientists, and so on. So we want to evolve our customization to new usages. And there are still a few more things that we want to rewrite and decouple in our data warehouse. So for all of that, we do have open positions. So we are hiring Benjamin, who's our talent acquisition manager, will be in the networking event, so you can go and chat to him about these. Thanks for all of your attention. I hope it was okay and the mic problem didn't trouble too much. And now it's time for questions. Thank you.